Hi, folks. This is Father Chandy. I'm here at Food for Thought, and I thank you for joining us again on this Friday morning and being a part of our Christchurch experience here online. Good afternoon, Natalie. Good to see you here. Meg, it's great to see you here. Deb, how are you? Good to see you. Jan, you too. Good afternoon. Ann Burke, thank you, Deacon Ann, for being here. And Sarah, hi, everybody, she says, and it's really wonderful to see all of you here. And I know that there are other people who are here as well. And, because we've been having some really, in these conversations that we have with one another, it's about encouraging each one of us or this community of faith that we have to face the challenges and realities of our days. And initially, that's why we started this whole this whole programming. But and hi, Sam. Good morning to you. I said that that's my wife, and I said hello to her already this morning too. But we started this programming to help us deal with the crisis that we're facing as a community, Westerly, Stonington, Mystic, as a diocese, Rhode Island, the Diocese of Rhode Island, and then as a state, as a country, and as a world. This is one of many different things that God, I think, is doing in communities. Where this is a place where you can find encouragement and hope to deal with the fears that we have. But in the meanwhile, what I've been finding is some great joy as we're engaging with this work, with this new technology, learning what it means and how to do it. Also, we've been having here on this show a number of really wonderful speakers that just connect with us and share insight and wisdom. And I've just been enjoying that, especially in these conversations. And today we'll be having a wonderful guest, a wise lady, someone who's very important to our Westerly community, and a joy to know. And hopefully you'll get to know her a little bit better through this show as well. But as I begin, usually I start with a thought of the day. And this morning in morning prayer, as I was reading the scriptures, the morning prayer assigned lectionary, it came from 1 Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 15, and there was just one verse that just popped out. Therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. I love that because, what Paul, I think, is saying, be stubborn. That's not an attribute of Christian living that we kind of uphold as an ideal. But I think in this verse, he's saying, be stubborn, be immovable, always excelling in the work of God, But that doesn't mean that you have to be stubborn in holding on to your position. I think I had a meeting yesterday with some of our committee members, and I saw things in one particular way, and I said, "This is the way it's got to be." But then, as I was looking at the committee members, and all of them, wise people, good people, they had a different opinion, and I came away thinking, God, I was just really very stubborn, and not in a good way, not in the way I think Paul is talking about. And as I was reflecting on it through the night, and then I wake up in the morning, reading this passage, I realized that the stubbornness that we should really engage in as people of faith is the stubbornness to do good, the stubbornness to be loving, to engage in the work of love. This is one thought that I hope that may help you. This is also a thought that you might engage in even at home. You've got all these different personalities at home, and if one is stubborn, I guess all of us can be stubborn, because I've got a whole house full of people who are just uh, not stubborn. I'm the one who's stubborn. I realize my wife's watching this, and but if you've got a whole household of people who have one particular way of looking at things and are strong in their opinions, then the stubbornness, I think, that you might be able to engage in and might work well with your family is just the stubbornness to be loving. And I think that's what Paul is calling us to do, especially the church. Just do want to mention that that we have these these online services. It's on Facebook Live, this program, and also all the various services that we have. But we also have it available on our Christchurch YouTube page, and it's also available on our website at christchurchwesterly.org. And so I hope that you will follow us on YouTube, or on Facebook, or access us through the website. Today, we have a wonderful guest. And I have this bio, and it's just amazing, all the work that she has done. And Deborah Goodrich Royce, and we know her as a wonderful member of our community, the Westerly Watch Hill community. She and Chuck Royce are supporters of our church and supporters of our community, and it's just beautiful. She's done so many things. I mean, she graduated summa cum laude from Lake Erie College in 1980 with a BA in foreign languages, French and Italian, a minor in dance. She has an honorary doctorate of humane letters from the same institution. She was an actress in film and television for over 10 years. She acted on the long-running ABC soap opera, All My Children. It'd be interesting to have her talk a little bit about that. And she went to star on feature films, and some of the ones that I really love is the 21 Jump Street, Hills 90210, Beverly Hills 90210, St. Elsewhere, and a bunch of places, and she's done so many things. And then she and her husband Chuck were married, and they reopened the Avon Theater Film Center in Stamford, Connecticut, and she's done some great work there. And she's on a number of boards. I could spend all my time just reading her bio, but I think, Ben, it's time for you to bring her on board.
Hi.
Hi, Deborah. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. I'm sorry I mangled your bio because there's so much in it. You're such an accomplished woman.
I think I'm like most women, and I think we as women are very used to having these different episodes in our lives. And I think I'm just in that stream. I've done different things. And I think probably every woman who's listening has had more than one identity in her life.
Yeah.
And maybe men too.
Yeah. No, I can sense that about you. I've just finished. This is my second time finishing Finding Mrs. Ford. I don't have the cover on it because I kind of, when I take a book and I really take it into me, I have 2 copies, by the way, and so I take it apart, I look at it, I underline it, I do all sorts of stuff, I write notes on it and everything, and so this is my working copy. But I also I read the book first time through Audible, and I think I explained to you that sometimes I'm the type of reader that I love reading books on Audible, but when I have a book, I always like to look at the end before the beginning. I start it and then I go to the end. So it forced me not to go to the end by going through Audible, and I'll tell you, there are so many twists and turns, and it kept me engaged. It was powerful. How did you?
All right, I started out writing a book really about that subject of identity. Who are we really? Are people who you think they are? I think most people are not. I think they are partly, but they have other layers, good and bad, beneath. And over time in the editing process, more of the twisty turny plots were added in just so there was more depth of plot, because the book, it definitely has a thriller plot, but it has different kinds of themes that are not so thriller-ish that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. I mean, especially I was drawn to, of course, I'm a priest in the Episcopal Church. I was drawn to all the sub themes of church, and there's an undercurrent of the stability of faith that I sensed through the main characters, and I don't want to give it away, but
No.
but it was just, it was, I found like there were some characters that I really disliked, and then I eventually started to understand them a little bit better.
Well,
And
I'd love to say something about the one. There was a character I didn't know if I could write, and it's two main women. It's Susan and Annie. And Susan was very easy for me to write. I felt more identification with her. And for me, I took a trip to Michigan where I had grown up. And my father's family was Protestant, but my maternal grandmother was from Belgium, and she was Catholic. So I was baptized Catholic, and I went to St. Mary Magdalene Church with my grandmother when I was little. And the Mass was in Latin then, and I really remember that. And as I was thinking, well, how do I write this character, Annie? I was driving around Detroit, and it really was a God thing. I had no intention of going to that church. My car just went there. I got out of the car. Some kid was cleaning the church so I could walk in the door. And I thought, what if I give this character who is wilder, skirting on the edge of trouble, what if I give her a foundation in faith? And it just suddenly enabled me to write that character and give her a place to come from and something to go potentially back to.
that was the moment I started to like that character. I really, maybe it's because I'm a priest, but it was at that moment that I just realized that, I realized, I looked at myself and I said, I'm being judgmental. And that moment, it's not just a caricature of a person, it's just, or a generalization of a person. It was seeing something in between, and the choices that one makes helps to develop who you are, but and your environment helps develop who you are, and it was just beautiful. It helped me to realize my own sense of judgment, and the arrogance I had. So thank you.
We all struggle with that, and if we could, and it isn't always easy, remember that whoever we're talking to or dealing with, they're only able to come at it from exactly where they are at that moment, exactly where they are. And the only person we have any control of changing is ourselves. I mean, that's very easy to say.
Yeah, no.
But I think now in this pandemic, being at home, I think in many ways it's an extraordinary moment. The mirror is turning on us, and we are able to, if we take a little time, to sit with ourselves. I saw something today on Instagram. Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, flashed by, and I thought, oh, what is he talking about? And he was pushing an app called Soul Time, which I have downloaded. Super short, 2.5 minutes every morning, little guided meditation. Fabulous.
Oh, I'm going to try and look at that. Soul app.
Soul Time, or Soul, maybe Soul Time, maybe Soul app.
I'll look for it.
It's good.
There was also, in speaking about this pandemic, there was in the book also, there was this constant theme of dealing with fear and choice.
Yes.
it's, all the characters had to deal with it, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
some are kind of stuck in one place. Some can't move past it. And then fear. I mean, I loved there was one passage about at the very beginning of the book about Susan. Now she remembered where Annie, the other character, is calling her to go to start a new job, and
Right.
and and Susan, who's very introspective in the book, was recognized the fear that's holding her back, that prevents her from living. And
Mm-hmm.
and so this choice that Annie brings is kind of like a choice to face that fear, to kind of live in some way. And there's and so fear is something that we struggle with even now in the pandemic, right, world.
Yep.
How do we live? How do we deal with our anxieties? How do we move forward? And the other character, as she develops, seems to be able to face her fears and still move forward to live.
Right. So I'm a person, someone said to me, you write anxiety well. So, and that's, as they say, not for nothing. I definitely have dealt with anxiety and fear in my own life. I don't think I'm that different from anybody else. And it is something I still have to manage and work with. I meditate in the morning. I read spiritually uplifting things. I remember when I was an actress, and if I had an audition, my mother, to be supportive, would say, "Don't be nervous." And that would always make me kind of just choke up because I thought, oh, I'm not supposed to be nervous. And I finally came to my place of thinking, I am nervous and it's okay that I'm nervous. So what am I going to do with it? I think I'm not a psychologist, so I really can't speak about this with any authority, but I think we do a lot more damage to ourselves if we pretend we're not feeling what we're feeling. So in this pandemic, again, we're in this bubble with ourselves, and thank God I don't happen to be sick, and the people in my household don't happen to be sick, but I try to manage how much of the world I let in. I let it in because I think it's important to know and to do something, to do what we can. But I also think you can't keep yourself in that hamster wheel of constant anxiety. You have to find the way of knocking yourself off of that wheel, whatever your way is, whether it is through God and religion, which it is for me, whether it is through nature and taking a walk. You've got to change your direction a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. We had a guest on yesterday who Sharon Yonkin, who is a psychologist or a counselor, and she said radical acceptance. Accept the reality that you are. Feel the feelings that you feel. Accept it, and then you can. And then with that acceptance, you could take the next step to move forward.
Yeah, I ended up reading a Buddhist book. I'm not a Buddhist, but Pema Chodron is a famous American Buddhist nun. And she wrote a book, I think in the last year, called Welcoming the Unwelcome. And I read it in January, and then I just read it again. And she talks about a technique that became very clear to me, sort of touching that thing you feel instead of shrinking from it, which is the natural reaction, in a controlled way.
Yeah.
Touch it. And I think in Buddhism, they talk about compassion. So in the touching the anxiety or the fear that's coming up from this extreme change of our world, she talks about this rising compassion for other people who are feeling what you're feeling.
Yes.
Which is an interesting point of view.
And I'll tell you, this Christianity and Buddhism have many interactions, and there are places where they interact really well. And I remember 20 years ago reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh that really influenced the way I was seeing church. It's called Living Buddha, Living Christ. And and it, this Jesus, and Jesus embraced those times where he embraced life, and he was mindful of his situation. He was mindful of the moment, and and we're having compassion for not only your neighbor, but also having deep compassion for oneself. It comes from
Yes.
scripture as well. Um,
That,
I did want to. I know that I mean, this is already half hour finished, but what projects are you working on? You and Chuck are just amazing in our community. You've done so much with the Ocean House, with with the United Theater, which is a big project that's coming up, and it's really engaging our community. There's so many things. What do you think what's exciting coming up for you, for us?
mute myself. I finished a second book called Ruby Falls. It's also a psychological thriller. It's coming out next May.
Yes.
Very different story, different characters, but it deals with similar themes of identity and who are people. And it's the journey of this girl who's abandoned in childhood, up to when she is an actress on a soap opera, and you kind of. It's a little bit more in the vein of something like Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, a little bit spookier because this kid is abandoned, and when she's an actress, she ends up marrying a very mysterious Englishman. He's actually Anglo-Chinese, so he's very exotic looking, and she keeps the secret of what happened to her in her childhood. But as the plot develops, you realize maybe he's not exactly who he presented himself to be either. So that's Ruby Falls. And now I'm working on a book which is really, boy, if I pull it off, it'll be a miracle. When my mother was 12, her best friend was murdered in Pittsburgh, a 12-year-old girl. It was December the 10th, 1948. And the girls, they went to a Lutheran church and they were rehearsing for the Christmas pageant. It was a Friday night in December, and my mother's friend was murdered that night at home. And it's an unsolved crime. And it has, as you can imagine, colored the life of my mother, my life, my daughter's lives. I think an act of violence doesn't occur in that single moment. It ripples out. And I'm writing the story of a woman in Florida, like I am now, who's in the middle of the pandemic, researching this murder that had such an effect on her family. And she's also writing a thriller at the same time that's happening here in Florida in the pandemic. So it's very complicated and really wrenching for me, but I'm in there. And that's called Reef Road right now. So Ruby Falls next year and Reef Road someday, I hope.
What does Reef Road mean anyway? What does that mean?
It's a road here, and I just fell in love with the name of it. And there's a whole surf beach at the end of it, and it sounds kind of like Key Largo or Cape Fear or something. I don't know. It just sounds like you're on the edge of something, and yes. I think that's what I'm going to call it. But Ruby Falls is definitely called Ruby Falls, and it's named for a cave in Tennessee where this girl is abandoned at 6 years old, and her name also happens to be Ruby.
We can't wait to read it. I mean, if you ever want to write about a book about the Episcopal Church, Sunil's a good name. One more thing, I just want to say that you have a way of really understanding situations. I mean, I was thinking about when you're in your writing, you describe people and motivations, and then you use in one of the passages you use the word seer. I think it was yours. A person who can discern the invisible in the visible, right? I think,
and I used it in a way I'd heard it before through a meditation teacher, and she had said, "Be the seer, not the seen."
Yeah.
And what she was getting at, and what I was getting at with this girl's experience of being in church, was I think it's very much a female journey. I think little girls are the seer. They're looking at the world. It's interesting. They're absorbing. And I think with puberty, they become the seen. They become the object of somebody else's subject. Am I fat? Am I pretty? Am I this? Am I that? And I think our work as spiritual beings is to bring ourselves back to being the seer, because it's a much better place to be than being the seen, because you're just not going to keep it up very well. You know, the physical body doesn't stay in the same place.
But that's one thing I see about you in this book. I mean, you really, I mean, you talk about Watch Hill and Westerly, and I learned, I've been living here for now a little bit more than 5 years, and through your eyes, I see Watch Hill and Westerly a little bit differently, and quaint. It's beautiful.
I think the writer is often an outsider, and I'm an only child, and I had a much older father, like my character Susan, and a much younger mother. So I think as an only child, I felt I was kind of watching. I would go to other families and the way they did dinner, or this or that, it was always different. And I had no like team to come, where we kind of did it our way. I was the only one. And then I moved to New York, I moved to LA, I moved to Paris, I got married, remarried, divorced, all that stuff. And so all these places I've come into, it's always with the point of view of the outsider. But one thing I want to say, if there's anybody younger listening, I wasn't able to really have the voice I have now when I was younger. It took me a long time to trust my observations, to be able to express my observations. And I think young people now, I can't stand when people say to young people, "What's your passion?" And, these poor kids, I think the very rare young person knows, and God bless them, how lucky for them if they know they have to play the piano when they're 8 years old. Fabulous. But I don't think many people do. And I think for most of us, we're works in progress. And that's this concept of redemption, that we can start again, that each day is a fresh day. And our past doesn't have to own us, but it is there and we can learn from it. So my observational skills took a long time to develop, or trust. That's the better word. They were there, but I did not trust them. I was very shy and not confident about them.
Well, the other thing is that I think it takes humility to be able to see things differently, and that's a godlike quality for me. And I want to thank you for blessing us with this vision.
Thanks. Thank you. It's really a treat for me.
Yeah. And so maybe you'll come back again with the other books when
I love that. I love that. And one more thing, the United Theater, which my husband was on meetings all morning, Zoom or however we all do meetings now, it's moving along, and we will be able to gather again, and we will be able to experience, art together again soon, I hope.
I was just talking to some of my investor people, feeling like we want to experience that Easter moment of community, that resurrection moment of getting together and gathering in places. And that would be kind of like another Easter moment, United Theater, bringing people in the community to be, joyous together. I'm looking forward to that too.
Me too. But I'm loving actually all this Zoom and stuff and FaceTime. I'm connecting with my far-flung kids in often deeper ways.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too.
Yeah.
I think God is working through all of this. Well, this is my point of view, right? I think we're moving in different ways in the world, and forced to move in different ways now.
We are spirit beings, really. And now we are forced to connect more at that level and hopefully push aside the more surface level.
Yeah. Well, again, Deborah, thank you for being with us. It's I could talk to you forever, it seems like, but we're already over time.
Well, thank you. My great pleasure.
God
And
bless
hi,
you.
Westerly. Thanks.
All right. Folks, Deborah represents some of the people here in this wonderful community we have. And of course, I want to just mention all the people who are watching as well. There's Jiju from Texas, and he might actually be in India right now. There's Dorothy, there's Kim Tremblay, Betsy, Natalie, Pat, Susie, Cal Lord, Bobby Allardyce from Florida, and there are many people that are happening, and of course, many people that are connecting through this program. And we want to thank Deborah for being with us today. Such a joyful lady and a wonderful lady, and she's married to Chuck, who is also a wonderful gentleman and good man of this community. One of the things that they do through the Ocean House is they're offering food for those who are in need for that. There's some work that they're doing, and so on our website we'll put some of the links to see what they're doing out in the community, especially through the Ocean House. And so um, I want to thank you all for being with us today, especially through this crisis moment. But we might continue to do this type of ministry if this is something that is effective and good for connecting people. I think it's a valuable ministry to connect. But again, we started this to help us walk together through this crisis, and we are doing that. But we'll continue to pray for our community, and we'll end today with our prayer that we usually say. It's a prayer written by Bishop Thomas Brown of Maine. Jesus Christ, you traveled through towns and villages, curing every disease and illness. At your command, the sick were made well. Come to our aid now in the midst of the global spread of the coronavirus. Heal those who are sick with the virus. May they regain their strength and health through quality medical care. Heal us from our fear, which prevents nations from working together and neighbors from helping one another. Be present with those in authority who are making hard decisions. Support the medical professionals, emergency responders, and our caregivers. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Join with me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Friends, go into the world filled with the light of God and spread it, because the world needs it right now. Thank you.